Welcome to the broadcast, my fruits. We are going to have a no-frills question and answer session, and I will try and remember to put some timestamps in the description box if you want to skip around, but we are going to have a hodgepodge, and I'll hold forth on questions royal and non-royal. Thank you for leaving them for me. We will dive right in with Courtney Zeitler. I'm an American, so is tea a drink or a meal? And what's the big drama over the BBC that everyone is commenting on? Ooh, scandal, scandal. Thanks, River. Thank you, Courtney Zeitler. Well, we'll turn to the BBC Scandal in a moment, but first of all, the very pleasant subject of tea. Well, that's a can of worms, because tea means something absolutely different to every individual in the kingdom and the Commonwealth and abroad. Whether drink or meal, it covers an umbrella, doesn't it? It really does. There are so many connotations, regional connotations, differences, and differences in generations as well. So I can only begin by telling you what tea means to me in fluid and solid form. And in fluid form, as a drink, a cup of tea is nothing any more fancy than a mug with a cheap old tea bag plonked in it, boiling water on top and a dash of milk. And a biscuit on the side to dunk in. Chocolate digestive is always very nice. Anything will do. That is a cup of tea for me. I don't drink posh tea unless I'm going out somewhere fancy to an hotel and you'll take an afternoon tea. But with me and the members of my family and my friends and acquaintances, you're never going to really get the fancy stuff with any of us. I'm afraid it's tea bags. Tea bags, tea bags. That's the way I prefer it. That's a cuppa to me. And tea as a food can be an evening meal. I mean, in our family and in most of my world, the evening meal is dinner. But in parts of the kingdom, especially up north, it's tea. And actually that's a rather pure way of looking at the evening meal, because that is what it was originally, I believe, going back many centuries. And it was only in the late 18th century that dinner, which was served at midday, what's the word I'm looking for? It migrated up towards the evening over time, and dinner became the evening meal and nudged tea out of the way. This is my understanding. And the midday meal became known as lunch or luncheon. I love that word, luncheon. It puts me in mind of terrines and sort of, I don't know, potage, soups and chunky ham sandwiches, this kind of thing. But all these courses have different meanings and memories for all of us, don't they? And they're sort of filled with nostalgia. But occasionally, even though I consider the evening meal dinner, I will sometimes refer to it as tea. What's for tea, Mum? You know, it'll slip out here and there. It's rather affectionate. And I've always had an affection for that word supper. I think supper is a fabulous word, and sometimes I fear that it's being lost. I fear it's being lost. But I love the word supper. Supper puts me in mind, supper for me, and not for anybody else, but for me. Supper for me, it reminds me of boozy liquid lunches with friends. One particular companion I'm thinking of, when we'd meet at lunchtime and not intend to spend the entire day quaffing, but one does, doesn't one? And one drink turns to 2, turns to 8, and you end up rolling home at the end of the night, and you realise that you haven't really eaten properly. You've just had some bread and balsamic vinegar brought to you at the table, maybe a packet of crisps or some knick-knacks of some kind, this, that and the third. But you haven't eaten properly, you haven't had any real sustenance. You get home and you got the munchies. And yes, and that is when supper comes out to me, the midnight hour, very, very late. So, and it puts me in mind of another gal, a very close friend of mine who now lives in Australia, but she's a fabulous chef. She went on to work at the Hawksmoor, and which is a very established, esteemed steak restaurant. in London and further afield, I believe. But she would get together the most fabulous midnight suppers out of whatever was left in our cupboards, which wasn't much. She lived in the attic apartment above me, and I was on the second to last floor. And we both just had these sort of studio apartments, but we had a shared kitchen. Actually, her little kitchen was so disgracefully kept. Sorry if you're watching this, my dear, but it was a complete state with mould growing, fungus all over the place. Bless her heart. She had lots of virtues, but cleanliness and housekeeping was not one of those virtues. I was the one that ended up doing it on several occasions, but I digress. She would nip down to my kitchen, so that ended up a sort of shared kitchen, that's right. And she would whip together these fabulous feasts out of whatever was left in the kitchen, with nothing more than a couple of onions, gravy granules, tinned minced beef, whatever it was, sprinkle some crisps over the top. But she would whip up these fabulous, fabulous confections out of nothing. So they're my fond memories of supper. But the word tea, I believe, remains a popular choice for the evening meal in the north of the country. Tea. As does dinner for lunch. So I hear, so I understand. And it's funny because even though for most of us in the south the midday meal would be lunch, most people still refer to the school meals and lunches as school dinners. And you have dinner ladies that chaperone the whole occasion in their uniforms. So it's a real sort of blend, isn't it? That we all understand, but it's sort of an instinctive, intuitive understanding of this nonsense. It's fun. It's fun. And of course there are also tea meals of a kind where you have posh tea, I'll call it posh tea, made with leaves, the proper way, stewed or whatever it is, served with various food items, such as high tea. Again, I believe that is favoured in the north, or was at one point in time. High tea, a savoury dish, whether hot or cold, served with tea, and the savoury dish would be followed by breads, cakes, butters, jams, this kind of thing. Afternoon tea, many of you will be familiar with. It's the kind of thing you will now take Granny out to on her birthday. Let's go for afternoon tea at a nice fancy hotel or some sort of establishment. Everybody does it these days, and lots of people do it very well, although it's become a bit hackneyed and it's become a bit of a sort of tourism, tabloidy tourism affair in some quarters, but it is done very well in many places. And afternoon tea is a round of posh tea, many rounds of it, sometimes a champagne tea with bubbles included, and that revolves around sandwiches usually, and little sweet bites and delicacies and pastries, but thinly cut sandwiches, this kind of thing. And then of course there are cream teas, which we discussed the other day, that emerged from the West Country. You have Cornish cream tea, Devon cream tea, and that involves sometimes a round of tea with the scone, and the scone is the main thing about it really, not the tea, but the scone, with lashings of cream, whether clotted or whipped, cream and jam. Wonderful. And there are family teas, all kind of teas, my dear. So, that's spilling the tea on that. Aurora says, your favourite place for tea or afternoon tea river, please? Well, Aurora, there are so many places I could tell you that I've been for fabulous afternoon teas, various wonderful hotels, especially obviously across London, which I'm very familiar with. I will usually go for a champagne tea because tea is not my beverage of choice. That would be coffee, but you don't take coffee at these kind of affairs, so I have to always complement it with a round or two of champagne, a few bubbles for a champagne tea. And so they become quite boozy affairs in and of themselves. I've had fabulous ones. Well, I'll tell you the first place that I ever went for an afternoon tea, a formal afternoon tea, if you will. The first hotel was the Park Lane Hotel in Mayfair. So that will always have a special place in my heart. And the reason I like it, I like spacious places and spaces in hotels that are old. I like them to be quite spacious with sort of large, what would you say, quadruple height ceilings, this kind of thing. Quadruple high ceiling. I like them to be spacious. I don't like them to be intimate because I don't like people hearing the gossip, because I like to go for a good gossip. So I don't like the acoustics to be all intimate, and I hate that anywhere you go. If I go to a cafe with a friend or out for a meal, I am in misery if I can hear what other people are saying and they can hear what I'm saying. It makes me feel extremely claustrophobic, and I go quite weird. And I know there's a friend that will be watching this that will have experienced that. I go quite weird. I just don't like it. So I don't mind if people are fairly close by, but there has to be chatter or something going on that makes me feel like I have a sense of privacy. And that's what I like about, it's the Palm Court at the Park Lane Hotel. Now, the Park Lane Hotel, I believe, has been reimagined as of 2016. And I haven't been there since it was taken over, I think, perhaps by the Sheraton. But I have seen pictures of it, the Palm Court, before and after the refurbishment. Well, I haven't been there in person, so I can't speak with any real knowledge. But what I will tell you is that it, in its new format, I'm afraid, from the pictures alone, has lost the charm that I loved of this fabulous Art Deco building, which was a fabulous, famous establishment, beloved of the bright young things of the 1920s. It's seen a lot of history, it quivers with history. There was a lot of sex in the air when I used to go a little more frequently, because I haven't been since 2016 or for some time before that. But I always used to really enjoy going there for clandestine, boozy afternoon teas, because it was always an excuse, not for tea, my dear, but for some booze and some gossip. Yes, and I know they had a piano there, but to my recollection there was a harpist as well. I might be mistaken there, but in my memory there was a harpist that used to play, and it was wonderful. And it felt cosy and grand all at the same time, and there would always be, you'd always bump into the odd eccentric there, and there was one very eccentric lady that used to live there, and she had some sort of mental issue. She was obviously extremely rich, evidently, and I never found out who her husband was, but she would roam around alone in this sort of high-collared affair. I hope that she is still there. She would roam around like a girl, and she would hurl abuse at one. Yes, and I went with several friends, and several times she approached, and because I was expecting it, and she was tolerated by the staff. You know, you gave up complaining about her, but she would call you, she would prostitute. She would sort of mumble in the background for a while, prostitute, prostitute, and accuse you of all kinds of things, and it became absolutely hilarious. And one became quite disappointed if you turned up and she wasn't there to hurl abuse at you. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Should be cancelled and dragged away now, my dear, of course, and shut in the tower and banned from the hotel. But a few years ago, before the last 5 years of Wokorama extremists, before then, these characters got away with being characters, and the world was richer for it, my dear, even if they were rude as hell, my dear. If I lose my mind, watch it, it hasn't gone yet. If I lose my mind, that is exactly how I want to end up, like some sort of ghost wandering around the Park Lane Art Deco hotel, hurling abuse at everyone and calling them prostitutes. What a wonderful legacy that would be. And a nice change from old Cedar Oaks, sitting there watching the TV. Yes. Well, that was the Palm Court. Now, returning to the second half of the question from Courtney Zeitler, what's the big drama over the BBC that everyone is commenting on? You won't have missed it in the headlines if you're in the kingdom, and even those of you abroad might have got whiff of this new scandal. And the papers are hungry for scandal because they feed off of the Meghan scandal, the Harry scandal. They love it. They all go nuts, and it makes them lots of money. And next was Philip Schofield. Now, there's that whole nonsense on stilts. great big drama made out of not very much, really. And now we have Huw Edwards. And Huw Edwards was more of a surprise than Philip Schofield to many, because he seemed very clean cut. No one really suspected that he might have desirous thoughts or leanings towards anybody other than his wife, his own middle-aged wife. But it appears, if allegations are to be believed, that he also held interest towards boys. But I am talking about boys over the age of, well, I believe, please don't quote me, I think 17 and beyond. Whatever the matter, and Google Huw Edwards if you want to find out about it. I'm not here to educate you on exactly what's been going on. But suffice to say, Huw Edwards, BBC presenter, he is the chap who announced the late Queen's death, or at least one of them. He is the chap who has always roped in, he's the highest paid presenter, I think, on the BBC, but he's always roped in to do the coronation. He did the coronation, he did the late Queen's funeral, always for the royal events, this kind of thing. Actually, I complained about him. I think it was during most of those events, but also during, was it Garter Day recently, which he might have narrated? It was something very recently in the last month. He was commentating, and I complained to you about him. I said, I wish Huw Edwards would just shut up and stop bumbling away. And I wish we could have silent commentary, because I don't rate him. He's very popular. I don't have anything against the man, but I don't rate him as anything, because he was mumbling away, this, that. I mean, even I, on this humble little broadcast, learned very quickly not to bore audiences with this, that. I see it on Loose Women, the programme, these kind of hesitations. I don't always expect complete flawlessness, but some rookie mistakes should be ironed out and shouldn't be paid top dollar of hundreds of thousands of pounds a year for. But if he puts bums on seats, so be it. I suppose he's doing his job. But the allegations revolving around Huw Edwards involve what appear to be young men, what appear to be OnlyFans models, and it appears that Huw Edwards was approaching them. He's being accused of abusing power, and these young men, whether he met them or not, was paying for explicit photographs, although it appears that this was the career choice of some of these people anyway. In a nutshell, he paid £35,000. This is the allegation. 35 over a period of 3 years for these photographs, and was kind of texting them, this kind of thing. The police have said that he committed no crime, so no action of that kind will be taken. But some people are outraged over the fact that he is a BBC figure, and everybody with a television here in the kingdom or access to that kind of thing pays a licence fee to the BBC, so there's outrage over this and the BBC's handling of it. I find there's less moral outrage, I sense less moral outrage than there was during the Philip Schofield scandal, because everybody also accused Philip Schofield of grooming. I reject that. I find the whole thing sophistry, and speaking on both Schofield and Edwards, I reserve the right to change my mind should anything else unfold or come out. Who knows what will emanate after all of these initial revelations. But as I said about Philip Schofield, they were two consenting adults, and whether they are sleazy, seedy, monogamous, not monogamous, having infidelities, that is their own private affair. I might find it undesirable, I might find it extremely distasteful, but I am not part of this pearl-clutching society, clutching pearls over two consenting adults. No, I am not, and I make no apology for it. No crimes committed. And by the way, one of these young people involved with Huw Edwards allegedly is said to have spent that £35,000 on crack cocaine. So there are issues about his vulnerability. There are issues about Huw Edwards' mental capacity, because his wife has issued a statement. She was the one that named him publicly, you see. But she issued a statement saying that he is under serious medical concern. He's been hospitalised for it. So it's a very serious matter for Mr. Edwards. I certainly wish him and Philip Schofield the best. But as I say, this sense of Puritanism that is flooding the headlines, and I'm not saying that it doesn't deserve to be in the headlines, but certainly in the Philip Schofield matter, it became more important than the war, the impending World War III matters of the world. And it wasn't just one story about it, say in a publication like The Mail online. It was 25 stories about it in one day, and I'm not exaggerating. My problem with it was the fact that it was being over-egged, and the pressure on one person for perhaps sleazy behaviour but not criminal behaviour, as far as we know, was unwarranted. And Philip Schofield had no involvement with his young friend until, and I'm talking intimate involvement, until this young friend was 20 years old. 20 years old. I don't care about a 20-year-old having an affair with a 50-year-old or a 55-year-old man. It's none of my business. I'm not going to clutch my pearls over that. Not the first, won't be the last. And after I spoke out on that matter, and I received some criticism from some of you for it, after I did that, which I also clarified was not a defence. It was not a defence. It was simply trying to bring some balance into what's really going on, and to try and encourage people away from conspiracy rumours and theories that he was grooming the boy since he was 10 years old, which was all lies. Although you can't convince conspiracy theorists of this kind of thing. They don't want to hear it. They want to believe that the very, very worst of people. Well, since I made the points I made, I was joined by a cacophony of other celebrities who gladly leapt not to the defence of Philip Schofield's actions, but to the defence of a sort of liberal attitude to life, whereby as long as you are not committing a crime, one should not be treated like a criminal. If you are having relations with a 20-year-old, you should not be lambasted as if you are having relations with a 10-year-old, because the two things are entirely different matters. Rupert Everett came forward to say he couldn't understand and couldn't believe what he was reading, that the world had lost its common sense. Caroline Flack's mother came forward to say that she had nothing but sympathy for Philip Schofield. Caroline Flack's mother. And Giles Brandreth, friend of the late Queen and Prince Philip and of the existing current King and Queen, came forward to urge more compassion, as did Alison Hammond, Philip Schofield's co-star, who everybody was saying nobody at This Morning likes Philip Schofield. They all hated. Well, Alison Hammond was crying and saying that she loved her colleague Philip Schofield. She loved him. Jeremy Clarkson spoke up for Philip Schofield, urging reason, as did Piers Morgan, as did Doug Murray, good old Douglas Murray. Basically to say, and these men, some of them gay, some of them not gay, just to say there ain't that much that's unusual about a 20-year-old dating a 55-year-old man or having an affair. It's been going on since the year dot, and we're talking about two adults. We are talking about adults. And somebody said to me in the comments, well, the frontal lobe doesn't develop until one is 25, so the 20-year-old was really still a child. Oh, give me a break, give me a break. We are not talking about a 15, 16, 17, 18 or even 19-year-old. We are talking about a 20-year-old. From memory. Was it 19? Regardless. I believe it was 20 when intimate relations began. It's nobody's business. Absolutely nobody's business. Now, if it was to emerge that Mr. Edwards was targeting people who were obviously vulnerable mentally, emotionally, and he was making some sort of play for them, or if he was harassing them, then that obviously throws a much more sinister quality, and that might be very possible. We are still waiting for further details to be forthcoming, but my understanding of the situation at the moment is that the young gentleman that initially was exposed by his own mother for these goings on, this young man has said that has denied that there was any improper goings on. A lawyer was hired, and also the police have rejected any claims of criminality and have said that that particular case, I believe, will not be investigated any further. So I understand people's curiosity. I understand people's desire to make sure that the vulnerable are protected. And I'm not discouraging that sort of inquisitiveness. I'm not discouraging institutions such as the BBC, who have a royal charter and who are funded by licence payers. I'm not discouraging those institutions from being encouraged to look at their behaviour and their way of dealing with complaints, because apparently this was sometime in the works, wasn't it? But similar to the Philip Schofield scandal, although they are both different, they are both very different in their nature, the two scandals. They're also similar with this sort of pearl-clutching, horror-watching, aghast media and general public. And it just leaves me a bit queasy and uneasy, because at this moment in time we are just talking about two individuals who are really rather messy and who have had regrettable affairs. And if you're wondering why I might seem a bit rattled about this matter, well, it's not even about Philip Schofield or about Huw Edwards, neither of whom I have any affection for whatsoever. Any affection for whatsoever. It is more about the puritanical atmosphere that the world is descending into, because, without question, one wants to protect children and one wants to be keen to protect the vulnerable. Without question, it goes without saying. But when it comes to young men in particular, and young women in particular, young adult men and women I'm talking about here, not children, young adults, we seem to be fostering this attitude of mollycoddling them when it comes to totally legal, totally consensual relationships, as in the case of Philip Schofield's adult male lover at 20 years old. And I'm not quite so genned up on this OnlyFans model that Huw Edwards had an involvement in, but I do know that the police have said it is not a criminal matter worth investigating at all, so I can only take their word for that. But when it comes to young adults, men and women, they need to get on with their life, make their decisions, develop a moral compass, develop their character, and make mistakes. And abuse of power, as they put it, certainly exists in all types of ways, but you're rarely going to be able to go through life avoiding any sort of abuse of power. And that doesn't just come from powerful celebrities and bosses. As you will know from your own experience of life, you can find that in any dynamic, in any part of society. I'm not denying that that is one part of it, but it is you will find it And I'm sure many of you have met them in partnerships and marriages of 40 and 50 years. You'll see it sometimes in elderly couples. Various abuses of power going on. And they're always regrettable. And hopefully they can become part of one's armoury of life that is a learning curve. Some people will suffer it for a very long time and either not learn the lesson or be too fragile to escape its clutches. What I'm saying is that people should be allowed to live life once they are an adult and make up their mind. If a 20-year-old wants to sleep with a 99-year-old, that's their choice. They might enjoy it so much that they only date octogenarians and nonagenarians, or whatever they're called. They might go on to enjoy it, or they might come to bitterly regret it and think, well, what was I doing? But they were 20 years old. That was their decision to make, and they should be able to get on with it and make those mistakes. How many of us have made flawless decisions in our relationships with friends or romances or family? And how many of us look back on those mistakes and feel sometimes some bitterness, sometimes regret, but oftentimes gratitude that you went through what you did, because most of the time when you dive deep into that dirt, you emerge with the jewels, the treasures of the sea. You emerge with little gems, little nuggets. You've learnt from the experience. It's fortified you. That is life, isn't it? You learn from those tough moments, those faltering mistakes. You have to allow young adult men and women to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And really, that is what I am rallying against, this atmosphere of mollycoddling youngsters who perhaps don't need it. And if the young worker, the runner that was involved with Philip Schofield, from what I know, he has no complaint about Philip Schofield himself. If it was to ever emerge that there was ever anything untoward with adult connotations going on before a legal, consensual age, that is an entirely different story and throws an entirely different light on proceedings. But humanity is sleazy. You're always going to find sleaze within humanity. And if it is legal and consensual, then much of it must be accepted. Elizabeth Pacina says, "River, dear fruit, what do you eat in a day?" Well, I can be very specific, my dear, because when I'm at home, I only eat from 2 brands for the vast majority of the time. When I'm out and about, I'm very social, so I eat out a lot and I dine out often. So that's when all bets are off and I'll have whatever I fancy, my dear. But when I'm at home, I have found 2 brands that have made my life so much happier and easier, because I very much believe in a diet that is based on food that is not processed. Now, I am not a natural cook. There are a few recipes that I've learned well enough so that I can entertain and do it well, and everyone will think that the food is delicious. But I'm not a natural cook. I don't mind and can absorb myself in cooking if the mood really strikes me. On a balmy evening where you can just have everything sizzling away and quaffing a bit of wine, but I am not a vegetable chopper. I don't like the vegetable chopping and arranging and getting all the right apparatus. I'm just not, and I really have tried to be Nigella, but I'm just not Nigella, my dear, and I've had to face that fact. I am not a domestic goddess in that department. Although I can still rustle up the good stuff. I just don't have the patience to learn how to be an exemplary home cook. So I accepted that. When I accepted that, my next mission was to find ready prepared food that was nutritious, well balanced, moderate, had to be delicious, but no processed. And I found it. And the 2 brands that I use, well, one is the less exciting brand, which is Huw, which is the very popular nutritious shake. It comes in lots of flavours and it's full of vitamins and nutrients nutrients and everything like that. It's not especially exciting, but I enjoy it. I always go with the berry flavour. Usually there are several flavours. Sometimes I'll have the chocolate flavour. There are about 8 of the flavours. I've also got into the iced coffee caramel instead of a morning coffee. So lately, actually, the past couple of weeks, I've given up coffee entirely because I was getting too hooked even on my 1 cup of coffee a day. I'm so sensitive to that kind of thing that it spoils my sleep. I crave it in the mornings, even though it's just 1 cup of coffee. It begins dominating my life and my mood. So I've had to withdraw entirely from it, and entirely from even this, which has 75 milligrams of caffeine. But this is nice, and it's healthier than a latte from the shops. And don't misunderstand me, when I'm on holiday or when I'm with friends, occasionally, every so often, I will treat myself and have real coffee and as much as I want. But generally speaking, at home, I will stick to 1 of these in the morning for breakfast. It's like an entire meal, but it's liquidized and blended. Lots of vitamins and minerals, this kind of thing. And I think it tastes really good. I have hundreds of these. I order them by the box load. Sometimes 12 boxes at once. And the delivery man does not like me at all when that happens. Actually, you used to be able to get a good deal by buying them in bulk. They would only come to about £2.50 per bottle. Now, lately, I think they've just gone up to about just over £3 a bottle. So I'll usually have 1 of these in the morning for breakfast. Some days when I don't feel like eating heavy, if you want to put it that way, I'll have 2 of these and then a main meal in the evenings. There have been times when I've wanted to feel especially light and free and good, if you will, that I've had 3 a day or 4 a day and just existed on these. There have been times it's sustained me perfectly well and I felt very good. But most days I will mix in that brand, the Huw brand, with a brand called Cook, which is ready-made meals that are frozen, but the brand is actually called Cook, and you can buy them online here in the kingdom only, I'm afraid, to the best of my knowledge. Cook, and you can also find them in various shops. I have a local co-op that has a freezer cabinet full of them, so they're popping up all around the kingdom. They're quite an established brand. They've been going for a long time, actually. They used to do a really good bread and butter pudding with chocolate orange. It was divine. I've actually inquired and asked them if they'd bring it back. But this range called Cook, I will show you. And just to make it clear, I'm not sponsored. I'm not promoting them out of anything other than admiration, because they have saved my culinary life. They've made my life. I actually purchased a brand new freezer that was big enough to hold lots of them so that I can order them in bulk and keep them in the freezer. And I just have this cornucopia of wonderful flavours, because the thing is, they prepare all their meals in large kitchens, a large kitchen, not a factory. There's no processed stuff in it, and it's all in moderation. They have tasty puddings, they have side dishes, they have pots for 1 for lunch, and then sort of main meals for the evening, and you can put your own sides with them and do what you will. But they just make it so simple. Most of the meals you pop in the oven, some you can pop in the microwave. And it just has taken all the thought that one has to put into shopping for food during the day. It's taken all that away from me. You get up in the morning, sometimes you think, I haven't got anything in. You've got to plan your day. I know there are difficult things in life, but we lead busy lives these days, don't we, my dear? Most of us are juggling. We've got things going on all over the places. Sometimes we're not in the city, sometimes we're not in the country, or we come home and the cupboards are bare. And it's difficult to organise for all of us, it is. And this just brings such simplicity and routine, but also variety to my diet. I don't have to plan at all, other than getting up in the morning thinking, I'll make sure that's defrosted, or I'll get that out. It's wonderful, and it tastes so good, and the ingredients are wholesome. All the meat is, none of it's organic, but it is higher welfare. For example, this is a basil and mascarpone chicken, which I like. Higher welfare British chicken breast marinated with lemon and garlic in a basil, pesto and mascarpone sauce, with semi-dried cherry tomatoes. So that's an example of one that I would have for dinner with, let's say, some frozen peas or some peas and carrots or mashed potato, and they do their own mashed potato that I use as well, but I do add some extra butter and I add some extra double cream to my mashed potato because I like it extra buttery and creamy. So you can kind of add your own decorations to them. I'll show you some of the examples. I know some of you will find this interesting. Creamy chicken with mushrooms and bacon. There's another one. They don't look that appetizing when they're frozen, but when they're done, just lovely. Creamy porcini and garlic sauce with bacon and roasted mushrooms. They have lots of Indian flavours such as chicken korma. Here they have a beautiful chicken satay one, which is wonderful. It goes in the microwave. Now this one is heavenly, and this one I prepared for my auntie. You know, my elderly auntie with dementia, and she's quite particular about her food. And this is chicken, pea and bacon risotto, this one. Risotto rice, higher welfare chicken, bacon and peas with mascarpone and creme fraiche, sauce with white wine and garlic. It is divine. It tastes as if some Italian grandmama has been slaving over a pot in the kitchen. It's so authentic. And it is authentic. This is the thing. You even have the name of the chef that made it, the signature. This was Cristina Rasu. Oh, so that sounds like an Italian name anyway, doesn't it? There you go. An Italian mama did make it for me. It's just made, in their kitchens and frozen in time, and you just reheat it. It's wonderful. Meatballs in a rustic tomato sauce there. Huge chunky meatballs. For lunch, they do various little pots for one. And by the way, all these meals, lots of them come, you can either get them for 1, for 2, for 4, some of them for 8. You can have great big group meals, so it depends if it's just you at home alone or your companions with you or your friends. But these sort of lunch pots, I use these for lunch. Halloumi and roasted vegetable pasta. That's one. This is my favourite lunch pot. Teriyaki chicken noodles. It is absolutely delicious, very sweet. The chicken, wonderful, divine. Sweet potato and aubergine. Sri Lankan curry. Green Thai chicken noodles. I promise I'm not sponsored. I'm not trying to sell it to you. I'm just letting you in on my secret because it's changed my life. Halloumi and roasted vegetable pasta. Have we had that one yet? I don't think so. I love a bit of halloumi. And sticky soy and ginger beef. And this is just a small selection. I'm actually running out at the moment, but I'm just showing you some of the stuff that's left in my freezer. They have all kinds of puddings, meringues. They have a wonderful cherry bakewell affair that you put in the oven. It comes out hot and I pour cream all over it or put it with some ice cream. They have various tarts. They have semi-freddo, gin and tonic flavour, sort of meringue affairs. These are my favourites though. The chocolate and salted caramel mousse here. They come in these rather small but decadent pots. Gorgeous, so rich and indulgent. Salted caramel, chocolate and honeycomb cheesecakes. Again, they come in little rounds. And this one, I've already nibbled half of this chocolate brownie cheesecake. See, this serves 6 to 8. Nice cheesecake there. That defrosts in about an hour or less than an hour. Sometimes I'm impatient, so I just hack into it anyway. This one is also divine, broken up into pieces and swimming in double cream. So that is mainly what my diet's made up of. And some of these meals that you see from the cook range, they're not cheap. They're not cheap. I wouldn't say they're outrageously expensive, but they're more expensive than a lot of ready meals that you will see. But it really is an economy because I limit myself. I don't feel the need for any little extras, which I used to have in my diet. All through the day, I'd have extra little munchies here and there. Lunch might have like 4 or 5 courses, dinner 2 and supper. But because these satisfy me, I don't drift. I really feel that it is worth it. I really feel that it is good value. And I really feel that I end up actually spending less in the long run because I'm buying clever and because I'm not getting ruled by the emotions. We are all subject to our emotions, emotional eating, if you will. When you get hangry, is it they say? You just want to eat something, don't you? And so you go out in search of whatever shop or outlet or delicatessen is going to offer you the fix that you want there and then. Well, the advantage of having this in my freezer and my Huw's in my cupboard or in my fridge is that it is there, you know. When hunger strikes, there is something there that is decent and nutritious and good and will fill me, and I won't need all to pay out for fancy extras or cheap, trashy, low nutritional, high sugar stuff that does me no good or my purse any good. So it works out very well for me, keeps me in check, and keeps my sugar levels in check, because sugar is my vice, and you know I will never deny myself the enjoyment of life, a pudding most days, and as you know at the moment I'm going through one of my cream phases. This is a President cream with vanilla in it, and I feel very naughty getting this. I did not realise how much sugar is in it until I devoured an entire can of this within 24 hours last week. This is my second can, but now I know how much sugar is in it. I will only allow myself too much, but you know, something like that a day, and it tastes just like a Mr. Whippy. For those of you in the kingdom, it tastes just like a Mr. Whippy ice cream. I hope that answers your question though, Elizabeth dear, of what I eat in a day. That is what I eat. Huw, the cook frozen food range, and sometimes a little titillation such as a squirt of whipped cream or a Reese's peanut butter hot chocolate, as I told you, although I'll only allow myself one of those perhaps every 10 days or so, but all in moderation, and my target is to avoid processed stuff and really sugary stuff. So no fizzy drinks with like 20 tablespoons full of sugar in them. Some of the coffee drinks, you know, the Starbucks drinks, one doesn't want to be a killjoy, but some of them, have you seen the sugar content? How many tablespoonfuls or teaspoonfuls of sugar they have in them? It blows the mind, and you wonder why people are coming down with type 2 diabetes, this kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that I would be very susceptible to if I wasn't watching myself, because you know, I can have the odd naughty moment, and I do not want to end up coming down with diabetes. So that is why, you know, I take the matter in hand, and I take it really rather seriously. But also, aside from diabetes, just sugar wreaks havoc with my skin, with my mood, with my feelings, and I see it shoved. I'm becoming very headmistressy, aren't I? But I see it being shoved down the gullet of the youth of today and the youth of yesterday as well, you know, for generations now. But you know, one sees sugar stuffed down their throat from cereal in the morning, which is basically all sugar and wheat or whatever, and then, you know, various treats at waffle houses and pancake houses, and one doesn't want to take away all the thrills of life, but you know, digestive biscuits all through the day with all fat and the sugar content, and it's everything in their dinner is surrounded by sauces with sugar, glucose this, glucose that. People think that fruit juices are a healthy form of sugar when, in my opinion, they are not. Unless you are in Spain or California, where there are gorgeous, fresh, ripe juices from the tree, and you can have them freshly squeezed into your cup and take it right there. Nothing nicer really than freshly squeezed orange juice in those places where the sun shines on the orange tree and it's delivered to you immediately. Oh, what a treat that is, my dear, what an absolute treat that is. But in the rest of the world, and when it's shoved and pasteurized into little containers, fresh grape juice, fresh orange juice, this kind of thing. I actually had a bit of a to and fro with, you know, that chain you have, Pret, the high street chains. There's Pret a Manger. Well, there's one called Eat. I've been talking about one called Cook. Well, there's another chain called Eat. And when I was working in the city for a while, it was the only place really to grab lunch. And I would grab a fresh orange juice that labelled fresh orange juice. And then I would discover that it was actually 3 days old. And I sent in a complaint. I said, how can you call it? I emailed them. Well, I think I complained at the kiosk, the till. They mumbled something, so I wrote in and I said, Why are you calling this and labelling it freshly squeezed? It's not. I'm just back from Spain, where I found out what freshly squeezed orange juice, and this shows me in the small print that it's 3 days old. Or when I asked, perhaps that was it, perhaps I'd asked at the kiosk how fresh it was, and they had said 3 days. So I complained, what, how is 3 days fresh, my dear? How is it fresh? Well, I was duly informed by the people that eat that actually, under possibly EU regulations at the time, I can't remember, whatever it was, had decided that if it was made within the last 3 days, don't quote me, it might have been last 4 days, or I can't remember what it was, but this potion that was 3 days old was legally entitled to be called freshly squeezed. Like, how does that work? How does that work? I realise I was naive, my dear, but I suppose that's how you learn, isn't it, my dear, by complaining like me and finding out there was nothing I could really do. They were legally obliged to stick a label on it, calling it fresh. I digress, but I'm just telling you, how are we all supposed to put any trust or faith in branding and packaging? You've got to be very witty about it and wise and savvy about the shopping. And I'm certainly not one that wants to go around and spend my life reading labels and looking at calories. Boring, boring, boring. That is not how I want to live life. And as I say, I go and munch whatever I want to munch when I'm out with friends, dining, this, that and the thing. You've got to live your life. But I have found the formula for making my home life, my home eating life, very simple. And long live that range, that cook range, long. You know, if that was to go under tomorrow and I couldn't buy from them anymore, I would be really stuck for a decent alternative that's as good, because to my knowledge there is not any frozen food company that compares to the cook range, because most frozen food is stuff full of preservatives as well. The quality of the ingredients isn't as good, even in our top sort of supermarkets. So, you know, this is good stuff. I trust in it and it feels good. Kelly Roberts, River, do you think the Hollywood Critic nomination was bought? Ooh. Yes, the Harkles have been nominated yet again. This time it's by that fabulous organisation that you all know and love so very well. Tumbleweed. The Hollywood Critic Association. Which are basically 3 clout-chasing schmucks. Actually, I'm being naughty. I don't know anything about these 3 geezers. Well, actually, it involves female as well. I don't know anything about these 3 amigos that run the Hollywood Critic Association. Truly, I don't. They could be absolutely fabulous people, but I'm going on a few things that I saw on social media and a couple of comments, which is unfair. It is unfair. I'm sure they're very nice. But this association, they're on their 3rd year. It's their 3rd annual year of the HCA Awards. Best streaming non-fiction series, I think. That's my biggest objection. Non-fiction. I don't actually object to them putting them in the frame, because I think it's... why not chase the name? Why not use Harry and Meghan to get your new award ceremony in the news? I don't blame I don't blame the hustle. Do it, my dear, but under non-fiction, that Netflix series, non-fiction, really, by the hairs of my chinny chin chin. No, my dear, no one's going to buy that. Pure fiction, fantasy, science fiction, and bad science fiction, as it is. Do I believe it was bought? No, I don't believe it was bought. Because I don't believe that Harry and Meghan would actually want, desperate as they are, want to associate themselves with this particular award. Wherever they enjoy associating themselves with an award, there's always some connection, isn't there? There's always some starlight that they want reflected and refracted onto them. For example, award ceremonies such as the Woman of Vision. Wasn't it that one that was where Glo Steinem was brought into the mix? Gloria Steinem. She was involved with it. So that her reflected glory was as a feminist icon. Although some of you in America told me you'd never heard of her, actually. I'd never heard of her, but I've heard wonderful things about her. And since then I've seen a bit of footage of her, and she strikes me as a lovely woman. She might not be completely my cup of tea. But then not many people are. But she did strike me as a lovely woman. But she had her involvement there, didn't she, with the women of vision. And same at the Gracies. I'm sure there were other people that part of those Disgracie Awards that she wanted to rub shoulders with. They're the times when it all becomes very incestuous, doesn't it? It becomes rather incestuous. Best streaming non-fiction series. Best steaming pile. That's what it should win, my dear, at this Hollywood Critic Awards. But they weren't able to win an Emmy, were they? Oh dear, an Emmy gives away thousands. Thousands! Anyone can win an Emmy. I've got about 10 friends with an Emmy. Anyone can win an Emmy except the Harkles. But not winning an Emmy, even after making most successful docuseries on Netflix and attaining good figures and attain a hell of a lot of press. And it's not the worst produced piece I've ever seen in the world, not by a long shot. It really isn't. It might be science fiction. It might be an exercise in propaganda and merchandising. It might be a complete and utter disgrace, but it wasn't the worst thing that I've ever watched, entertainment-wise or production-wise. But don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. Don't tell me that it was non-fiction. And please accept the fact that the Emmys have about 6,000 categories. It's hard to escape getting an Emmy. They might as well lay out a lemonade stall and give out a trophy with each pitcher of lemonade. They give the things away. But guess what? None for the Harkles. That should only go to prove how unwelcome and undesired they are in some circles, especially where there are votes that are counted not just by those that rub shoulders with the Harkles and they're scratching each other's backs and praising each other for being fabulous people and feminists and philanthropists and so charitable and women of vision. The disgracefuls and the disgracies. No, the Emmys are made up of industry peers, to my understanding. I can't be bothered to do that much deep investigation, but to my understanding, they're made up of industry peers, this kind of thing, and the industry peers say no. The industry peers say no. And they're ignoring this Netflix episode, possibly because some of them simply don't approve of it on a moral level, and they don't want to invite the likes of Harry and Meghan Sussex into the club. Into the club. Your name's not down, you're not coming in. Whether it's Harry, Meghan, or Liz Garbus, or Liz Garbage. You're not coming into the club, you're not going to win an Emmy, you're not going to join the Emmy winners, the Tony winners, or the Oscar winners. Not that I hold any of those institutions in particularly high esteem, I've got to say. It's not really like the old days. And even in the old days it was rather corrupt. And award ceremonies are all corrupt, as far as I'm concerned. Unless you're talking about the local gymkhana that's been opened with a ribbon cutting by Princess Anne. The rest of them are all corrupt. It's all who you know, what you know, and it's all political, and it's all dicey, and it's all who's shagging who, and you know. So I don't put much faith in them anyway, but the fact that even the Emmys have cast them asunder. It doesn't bode well for them, my dear. But on the subject of Glo Steinem, she popped up in And Just Like That, you know, the new Sex and the City affair, because it's series 2 of And Just Like That, and we spoke about the first series last year and my disappointment in it. Well, Gloria Steinem popped up in a cameo. She's amazing. She was a great actress, you know. If she hadn't have been a female activist and woman of vision, she would have made a fabulous actress, and I know it when I see it, my dear. I know what I'm talking about. She was fabulously natural. She was only in a scene for 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. Wonderfully natural, super spontaneous. She could have been a star actress. And as I'm saying this, I don't know if she's done any acting. Perhaps she has. I don't know about it. And she's had this other career. But I'm telling you, my dear, she was a great natural on the camera. In this winter of life, she would have been a rave actress. I know what I saw. I just thought I'd pop that in there out of interest. She was brilliant. But as for And Just Like That, I mean, thankfully Miranda has dyed her hair back to red instead of that hideous, ghastly grey that she was doing. Some people can do grey very well, or white very well, and it's the right choice. But for her, no, she looked like an old used up sponge brush, shoe brush. Yes. It wasn't good. You know, why did they call it And Just Like That anyway? Why did they not continue to call it Sex and the City? Was it some legal reason? I don't know. I can't see why. But that was the first mistake. The second mistake was bringing it back with all this wokery, this woke nonsense. They are trying to iron out some of the problems that were present in the first series of And Just Like That. I'm still going to watch it just simply because I was such a fan of Sex and the City, like many of you, and I want to see how the story plays out. You know, I've looked now and can't look away. I think it would have been wonderful if it had ended at the end of the series. Originally, the Paris episode, Mr. Big, you're the one, you've always been the one, on the bridge. I think that was an exquisite ending. The movies were fun, but not as good. And this whole thing is a travesty. What they should have done is ignored all the people wanting them to come back and have token members of every community in it, simply because it's de rigueur and the fashion, and they have some woke agenda to fill and a checklist of what to put in and what to say, and all the genders and the pronouns and the letters community. They should have ignored every single ounce of that, and they should have strode in and shown the world exactly what it's missing. Exactly what it's missing. Because we do all miss that sense of fun, freedom and frolicking in that less sensitive pre-social media era. And somehow the world needs to be reminded of that, how much fun it was. They should have strode in unapologetic. And yes, it did suffer, of course, without Kim Cattrall. Now, I told you before that I'm actually team SJP on the Kim Cattrall affair, because I don't appreciate the way that Kim Cattrall spoilt it for all of us fans of that series by letting us know that they hate each other. we can suspect these things, we can hear rumours, but to actually hear her confirm it, I thought was bad form, because it spoils the fantasy, doesn't it, my dear? It might be a bit juicy, but it spoils the fantasy. Well, and many of you disagreed with me on that, by the way. So you don't have to tell me that I'm wrong and that, you know, SJP is a great big narcissist. Whatever, everybody's a narcissist these days, my dear, isn't it? Well, I could say that I've seen narcissism in Kim Cattrall as well, when she tells the interviewer recently why she was persuaded to return for the end of this current series, because she's going to appear in a final scene, which might indicate that she's going to appear again in the third series and return full time. Who knows? All we know at the moment is that it's a cameo, and all we also know is that Kim Cattrall, I believe, said that she would never return, that nothing would convince her to return. Well, as she told a TV interviewer last week or whenever it was, well, when you get a call from the head of HBO and he asks you exactly, what can we do? What can we do? I forget how she phrases it, but she very smugly and narcissistically tells us, well, no. Then I thought I would play ball and tell them what I want, which is basically a great big fat check, which is fair enough. And I wanted to bring back Patricia Field, because she dresses us so well. We had to bring back Patricia Field. And she really virtue signals that she wants to bring back the wardrobe mistress, Patricia Field, who is absolutely fantastic. The series would never have been the same without her in a way. But I'm sure anybody could have dressed Samantha for one cameo scene and gotten away with it. But she wants to virtue signal and tell us that she's bringing back. It was her idea to bring back Patricia Field. Well, I just hope, to be quite honest with you, that I wake up from this bad dream of And Just Like That and the Kim Cattrall fallout, and I want it to be a Bobby on Dallas moment where the whole thing never happened and that they didn't even bother whipping up another new series or an extension of the lives of Carrie and Charlotte and Miranda and Samantha. Or if they did, then you come back all guns blazing, head to toe, you know, in your Manalos and your vintage and your pure. You keep those characters true to how they were and you ignore wokery entirely. And you smoke and you drink and you shag and you have fun all around Manhattan and light up the streets again. Over the top exuberance, high octane. That would have put the bums on seats. It would have got the boomers and the Middle Ages and the cantankerous all glued, pining with nostalgia for the old days, and the little young wokey ones coming up, they would have seen, oh, what's this? Oh, people used to have fun. People used to have fun when everything was politically incorrect. And you could do as you will, and there was a bit of freedom, and no one started calling the police if a 20-year-old decided to shag a 99-year-old. You know, they would start pining for the glory days too, and the whole world would change and wokedom would be dead. That's what should have happened. They weren't brave enough, were they? They weren't brave enough. Now, I'll end on a nice note from Babe Louie, who says, I have picked up tips from you about how to walk correctly without dragging my shoes. Well, you've never seen me trot anywhere, so I'm assuming that I must have complained about that in a previous broadcast, because that is one of my pet peeves. Ladies in particular, it's usually ladies that drag their shoes, whether it's heels, thongs, flip-flops, clogs. There was one the other day when I was in the Co-op, actually, stocking up on some of my cook frozen foods. There was a lady in her pyjamas and her slippers. That is what it's come to. Wee Willie Winky running through the town, but without the charm. I mean, slovenly, we're not talking about attractive nightwear. Manky old pyjamas, PJs and her slippers. And I heard her coming. And I shot her a look. I mean, I have complained to people before, and I've said, pick your feet up. Ah, that's what you're referring to, isn't it, mate? I think I told the story once of how I was walking next to someone sloppy, walking along with her coffee, and I said, pick your feet up. And I told the girl. And I'll tell them again. I'll tell you better. It is so slovenly and forlorn. And good on you, Babe Louie. I mean, you know, shame on you that you were dragging your shoes, but at least you heard me. At least you heard me. And actually, this comment makes me very happy. This is the kind of comment that makes me very happy. Because of my influence, you are not going to drag your shoes anymore. Do you realise that is going to make someone's day? And you're not going to annoy them. And you're not going to walk around like some catastrophe. I've got no problem with you if you're a street walker. I've got no problem if you are hooking all kinds of things, my dear. I live for it. But just don't drag your heels as you're doing it. You know, don't drag your shoes along as if it's Santa's sack. As if your limbs are some floating edifice that is separate from your deportment, and you're just trailing them along, hoping for the best as they flap in the breeze. It is just the epitome of unladylike or ungentlemanly. Pick up your feet as you are walking along. It is entirely slovenly. So that pleased me. My dear, that pleased me. I thought that we would talk about more royal subjects today, but I've been waffling on too long. I haven't got time to address any more questions, so I'm sorry if you were expecting more about royalty, but the name of this broadcast is River, and I am quite entitled to talk about whatever I want to talk about. It's not restricted in any way other than the YouTube community guidelines. So, in that spirit, I simply waffled and rambled in response to some of your questions, and I'll continue to do so over the summer. So keep them coming in. And I thank you very much for joining me, indulging me, and for engaging with the broadcast. Leave me a juicy comment. If you enjoyed the show, my tip jar is in the description box. And if you didn't, be gone and never darken my doorstep again. Nobody forced you here. Nobody made you watch, did they, my dear? So you have your free will. Be off with you. And so the rest of you, see you next time, my fruits. Take care and toodle-pip.